Hi guys, Dr. Rachel Hippolyte here. So, we're going to talk today about the prefrontal cortex and why the prefrontal cortex is so important. So, the prefrontal cortex is part of the brain that makes us human. It's much, much larger in humans than it is in dogs, cats, mammals, and it is the part of the brain that has evolved since we were cavemen. So if we go back to caveman times, it really was the emotional brain that hasn't really changed very much. So we do still have that, but our prefrontal cortex has evolved to keep a lid on those emotional centers. Okay. So the way I like to think about the prefrontal cortex is like your executive function of your brain. Okay, it allows us to focus. It allows us to have forethought, to see solutions, to see problems, to see consequences. It allows us to have good judgment. It allows us impulse control, so that we're able to make better decisions rather than impulsive decisions. It helps us be organized, it helps with planning, problem solving, and also learning from experience. And it helps us, it gives us the ability to express and to be able to feel emotions in a healthy way. Okay. It gives us empathy, our prefrontal cortex. Um, the prefrontal cortex is the one area of the brain that really doesn't do well with stress, and that will certainly prolonged stress really decreases the function of the prefrontal cortex. We see low prefrontal cortex in ADHD. This is more of a genetic disposition. Um, the difference between just having a low prefrontal cortex function and being ADHD is with ADHD, when they try and focus, that function drops even more. So just because you're ticking all the boxes to having low prefrontal function, um, it doesn't mean to say that you are ADHD. Although um, I think there's a huge amount um, of my generation that haven't been diagnosed as having ADHD, and I think if we'd known about it back then, life just may have been a lot easier. Okay, so what happens when the prefrontal cortex doesn't work as well as it should? Okay, so really, the prefrontal cortex, like I said, it watches, supervises, and guides and directs and focuses our behavior. So it keeps all of our emotions under control. When it works well, we have good emotional control. We're a lot more logical. Okay, so what we find in low prefrontal cortex is we get very distracted. We can't organize anything. We can't see the bigger picture. We tend to stop and start things. When my prefrontal cortex isn't working well, oh my God, I'll go to do a task and something will grab my attention, and all of a sudden I'm on my phone doing that task rather than the task that I had. Oh my God, tidying the house. I just literally wander from room to room. Nothing ever gets done. Okay. My focus isn't there, and the prefrontal cortex isn't stopping all the other signs to stop all the other areas to stop me getting distracted. Um, so when your prefrontal cortex doesn't work well, the prefrontal cortex almost acts as so say that's your emotional brain, your limbic system, and your real primitive part of your brain. When the prefrontal cortex works well, it literally allows the emotional brain to be tapped, okay, to be locked so that it's only reacting when it needs to. So when the prefrontal cortex doesn't work as well as it should, okay, so the function's decreasing, then there's no brake on the emotional part of the brain, the anterior cingulate gyrus, the fight, flight, freeze, the amygdala, the limbic system. Okay, this is untapped, so there's no control of this. So that's when we then tend to get poor emotional regulation. We get angry, we can't sleep, we overthink, we worry, we become compulsive. um, our impulses aren't under control there before we become very impulsive. We make rash decisions. We're not patient. So that is why your prefrontal cortex, and a good functioning prefrontal cortex, is probably the most important in um, in helping your brain. And there's a number of things that we can do that, but training your brain is certainly one of them. Being in the moment, bringing yourself back to now. When you're in emotional brain, believe me, you're not in the moment. You're in the past. You're in your head, or you're in the future with anxiety. Um, so signs that your prefrontal cortex aren't working as well as it should. You're getting distracted. You can't focus. You can't stay on task. You can't plan, you can't see the bigger picture in things. Your emotional regulation isn't anywhere as good as it should be. You're getting irritable, you're getting angry, you're crying a lot. Okay, um, you're you tend to not have drive. You tend to start isolating yourself. You're not in the moment. You're always in your head. So people can be talking to you, but you're in here. Okay, all signs that your prefrontal cortex aren't working as well as it should, and these are big signs that something needs to be done about training and looking after the most important organ in your body, your brain. If you want any information about your prefrontal cortex, please just DM me. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you don't think your prefrontal cortex isn't working as well and you'd like to ask a question, and believe me, I see more prefrontal cortex not working well than I see prefrontal cortex is working well. Hope that makes sense, guys. Remember, look after your brains. It's the only one we've got. And without a healthy brain, we don't have health, full stop. Thanks, guys.